People hear me now? Yes, excellent. Oh, and my slides are up. Excellent. Hi, everyone. I'm going to bring the international flavor this morning, and I understand that I'm keeping you from your coffee break, so I hope that the next 40 minutes is actually interesting for you. Is the audio okay in the back? Can I have some waves in the back so I know you can hear me well? Fantastic. Thank you. So I was invited here today to talk a little bit about what I envision might be a controversial topic for some of you. And that is what I'm calling protecting without excluding. And I'm going to tap specifically into the social media ban. You may have heard about this happening around the world right now, and I want to walk you through what's going on and why I'm reasonably critical of this, despite being a proponent of healthy well-being for kids on the digital space. So the social media ban is something, if you've been reading anything right now, you know that this is a discussion happening globally. And one topic that's being tied very often into it, including in the EU, is age verification. So you're probably seeing conversations about ways that we can check how old a young person is and decide whether or not they should be in that digital space. Now, in today's talk, what I'm going to highlight is how we got here and how I have some concerns. I'm not against age verification, but I have some concerns about privacy, effectiveness versus evasion, kids will find a way, accessibility versus inclusion, child safety and autonomy, and also child's rights. I think this can be part of the solution. I don't think it is the solution. What I think is that the best youth social media policies are going to do both protect and empower. And that's where I think we're leaning on the wrong side right now by focusing only on protection without empowering. So I hope by the end of the talk, maybe a few more of you think, oh, I can see a way forward here. So how are we going to talk about this? How am I going to end up at this point today? I'm going to start by walking you backwards, and I'm going to tell you a story about how we got to where we are. Some of you might know part of this story, but I bet that most of you don't know all of this story. Okay? So I want you to go back in time to about 2020, when we were all living our best lives in the pandemic. We were making a lot of sourdough bread. We were sitting at home making banana bread, sourdough bread. We were finding ways to talk to each other online. Do you remember these terrible moments? All right, I need some engagement, guys. Come on, like I would with my students. I'm a professor. I'm looking for you here today. So we remember this time of all sitting at home. This was happening around the world. And unfortunately, what happened during this time is we saw something called technophobia. People began to be more frustrated and concerned about technology. We saw, for example, for reasonable points, time online was growing significantly. We all were online all the time. We saw actually a significant increase in organized crime targeting young persons. We saw a much significant increase in child sexual abuse material. We saw a high increase in cyberbullying and toxicity targeting kids. And we saw new forms of abuse, including AI already being used as a form of abuse. This all happened. I see you all taking photos of the slides. You're welcome to take as many as you want, but as a heads up, I'll send you the slide decks after. It's no problem, just so you know. So this was going on during the pandemic. A couple other things were happening at the same time. We started to hear across the globe a call for accountability from big tech, looking for them to be held responsible. What role do they play in the lives of our young persons? We also saw that the trust and safety teams at these big tech companies were comparably underfunded. So now we have lots of increasing concerns. We have people saying, wait a second, what are you doing with my data? What are you doing with my kids' data? How are you using this information? We saw the groups of people who are responsible for protecting our young persons underfunded. And then we saw data showing that the youth mental health crisis was getting worse and worse. In fact, internationally, 1 in 4 young persons under the age of 25 is going to experience a serious mental health illness globally. That is a big number. That is real, and that is concerning. Now, imagine this situation. Put yourself back there for 1 second. Go back a few years. Now, this is the story we're at, and then something happens. A book comes out. How many of you in the room have heard of this book? About 70% already, yeah. Book called the Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, comes out. Becomes a bestseller globally. And as a quote was listed, enter Jonathan Haidt, a breed of celebrity academician armed with simplistic but seductive, technologically deterministic logics, and cherry-picked science. But it starts to take hold. Now, key in this book that goes really quite globally, is there's an interesting claim made. Haidt's main argument, now remember, put yourself in this moment, everything is increasing, there's concerns everywhere, and a book comes out and says, children's adoption of social media coincides with and is the most probable explanation for the youth mental health crisis. And he claims the planetary rewiring of childhood is driving a rapid onset of gender dysphoria at scale and the decline of democracy. Okay, then. That's a pretty big-ass claim. So, what happens with this book? Well, a lot of people get this book in their hands, including the premier's wife in Australia. So one of the premiers in Australia, his wife gets the book and reads the book. Now, if you read the book, which I have, it does resonate. And I'll talk today about why it resonates. She reads the book, and she says, I'm worried. Talks to her husband, and the premier on Mother's Day, May 2024, makes an Instagram post. It's not lost on me, by the way, that he announced this on social media, that they were seeking to ban social media for children under the age of 14 and requiring consent for under 15. This was his original goal, May 2024. So we have a rise of technophobia, we have an increased numbers of childhood problems, and then we see Jonathan Haidt's book saying, that's why these two, X leads to Y. And then the premier says, okay, I'm going to ban it. And Australia becomes the first country to announce a ban in social media. After this announcement comes out in May 2024, we see things go super fast. Within minutes, what happens next? First, we see the Let Them Be Kids campaign launches. This is a campaign in Australia that says, give kids back their childhood. Put them back in the playgrounds, put them back outside, get them away from devices. All things that I think many of us here can find an understanding in. A few minutes after that, we see quickly the key decision makers across Australia weigh in, and they say, both sides, doesn't matter, the left or the right, we support this. So now all of a sudden, we have this emotional raging motion. We have all political parties, big leaders. We also see Instagrammers, influencers, big names, the famous stars in Australia all coming out. We're going to bring kids back their actual life. Let them be kids. And the premier affirms that there will be legislation by the end of the year. This is moving really fast. Now, what happens next? Well, science says, maybe we could be part of the discussion. So science responds loudly. First, people say, hold on. You are making big decisions on a book, but the book has a lot of problems. One, the data is correlational. Two, it's not usually with young persons. Three, it's not with today's platforms. Four, you didn't include all the studies out there. You only picked the ones that made your story work. Five, it treats WhatsApp the same as YouTube, the same as Snapchat, the same as TikTok. And six, you didn't even measure mental health in all of the studies that you put in there. So there's a few things going wrong with this data. So scientists try to say, hey, wait a second. The book you're using is not entirely accurate. Let's take a minute. What comes next? More science comes out. There's a statement made that social media, there's quite a large research study that's run, they say social media is actually one of the least influential factors in predicting adolescent mental health. The National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine actually say, contrary to the narrative that social media is universally harmful, the reality is far more complicated. More statements come. Next thing you know, what do we see happen? Over 100 Australian scholars, 20 international scholars, myself included, and 20 youth-facing organizations urge the government to rethink. And they say, wait. Don't just ban. Let's stop and think of nuance, systemic, and an evidence-based approach to regulation. Nobody was saying don't do regulation. Everyone was saying, hold on. Let's think about what we should do. What comes next? Candace Odgers, so people are still, the narrative's still going. More scientists come out and say, wait a second, I think you're missing the point. We're not saying that there's not a problem. We're just saying what you're trying to do is not going to fix the problem. Two things can be universally true at the same time. One, there is no evidence that using these platforms is rewiring a child's brain or driving an epidemic of mental illness. That can be true. And at the same time, it can be true that we need reform, especially how much time young persons spend on these digital technologies. Both can be true at the same time. Nobody was saying, let's not do better. The answer was, you're not going to fix mental health by banning social media. But that message was lost. Science loses here. So scientists try more and more and more, and they come back again and they say, okay, let's try this a different way. Children have an actual protected right, according to the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child, to be protected in the space, to have the skills to use the space, and to participate in this space. You are violating their rights if you remove this entirely. More science comes out. We know that social media can have positive benefits for kids. We know that not all kids are the same. We know that mental health is at risk, and banning social media is not going to fix that. We know that kids are struggling with overuse, and that needs help. We know they need digital competence skills. We know that responsible tech should include well-being by design. Regulation is needed, and that evidence makes very, very clear that bans are ineffective and often harmful. So there was a lot of evidence coming. So it was a busy time in 2024. What happens next? The social media bandwagon continues, probably because of what scientists would call a confirmation bias. At the end of the day, it's sort of, if you sit here right now, you're probably thinking, I feel a little bit about this. I'm bothered because there is truth in this. There is a problem. And so this basically, one quote was, hate's argument will resonate with anyone who's ever struggled with feeling that they can't stop looking at their phone. I was digging a little bit into different parenting blogs and things, and it was interesting. One mother said, I understand the argument might not be compelling to researchers who are focused on the data. But as a mother, I see his point, referring to Jonathan Haidt. And then Jonathan Haidt himself said, look, if you listen to the alarm ringers and we turn out to be wrong, the costs are reversible. If you listen to the skeptics and they turn out to be wrong, the costs are much larger and harder to reverse. I get it. I get why this is happening. In fact, what we actually have is really this perfect setup to really make sure that what happened next went really fast. 3 months after the premier announced the proposal, draft legislation was introduced to amend the Online Safety Act and raise access to social media at age 16. There was no opportunity for public scrutiny, and it passed through Parliament with bipartisan support in 2024. And I get why. It's appealing. A couple interesting facts about this. The act contained no definition of what social media decided that the Minister of Communication could decide that. When he started, they said YouTube was not social media. A few weeks ago, they announced, YouTube now is social media. They didn't even know. The act prevents kids from under 16 from making an account, but it lets them still access social media without an account. And it doesn't actually stipulate how age gating will be enforced. Basically, they had no idea what they were going to do. Now, I told you the story began at the pandemic. I'm going to take you back a little bit more. Go back a little bit more with me, because here's a little interesting point that doesn't ever make the headlines. In Australia, there had been work going on to charge social media companies for their use of journalistic product. So if journalists wrote a story, and if the big tech companies used that story in Google or Meta, right, and they shared that story, Australia said, you need to pay us for that. This was something happening years ago. And what happened was this, it was called the News Bargaining Code. This was in 2021. So yes, that pandemic was leading to our whole technophobic space, but something else was happening. There was this Australia announcing this news bargaining code saying, actually, if you big tech companies want to use what our journalists create, you are going to pay us for them. Between 2021 and 2023, Australia hailed it as one of their biggest success stories. They brought in over 200 million Australian dollars. Early in 2024, before our Mother's Day announcement, Meta decided it was no longer going to pay for this anymore. If you remember, you might have seen the news back in 2021 when this first started, there was a battle between Meta and Australia. And for about couple days, I forget the exact amount, Meta pulled its product and you couldn't access Facebook in Australia. And people were freaking out. Eventually, Meta had signed on to this and said, okay, we'll pay. 2024, Meta says, I'm done paying. The government, you start seeing news articles quoting things like, they're looking at forms of pressure that can be brought to bear on the platforms, including at times their harmful impact on young persons. So 2024, first part, Meta says, we're done paying. Suddenly, the government announces they're looking for points of pressure. What can they do to push back? 2024 point B, the premier announces this legislation and let them be kids' launches. So my question is, was it really ever about the kids? Or did all of this just start because the government was going to put pressure on Meta and this was something they could find? I don't know. As a scientist, I really don't know. But I do know everything I've told you up to this moment was true. This, I don't know the answer to. But what happened after this, I would also tell you. When I study this from the perspective of misinformation, this has everything I need for a perfect misinformation campaign. Confirmation bias. Parts of it are true, so I can lean into it. Emotional triggers. These are our kids. Distrust. Who's trying to take my data and what are they doing with it? Political engagement. High figures involved. High stress situation. Mental health. Plus a very quickly changing dynamic landscape. You put this together, you get misinformation. And when you get misinformation spread. And oh, did it spread. As of this morning, I've identified 13 countries and counting that are discussing in some way, shape, or form policies for banning social media for young persons. So far, and it continues to grow every day. What worries me about this? Here's the thing. I am not pro-media. I'm not sitting here or standing here saying to you, let's let kids do all of the things all of the times. Absolutely not. But I am pro-science. And what I know right now is this is an emotionally charged decision, not scientifically supported. I know it violates the rights of young people to ban it entirely. I know they will end up in more unsafe spaces, and that worries me. Kids will find a way. There's no implementation strategy. And when I talk to the different places and spaces that are trying to implement this right now, often the very people who are in charge of writing policy don't even understand the technology. One person said to me, we're just going to ban everything with an algorithm. And I said, oh, so you're banning Netflix? No, that's fine. Oh, okay, but that has an algorithm. No, it doesn't. Oh, yes, it does. You're going to ban the food shopping apps that we use in the grocery store? No, they're fine. They're using an algorithm. No, they're not. We have a situation where sometimes the people who are less informed, which I don't blame, we're all trying to learn this stuff, are making policies. And they're not stopping to talk to the scientists who are doing the work. This worries me. But this doesn't mean I think we should have a free-for-all right now. I'm actually incredibly worried about the current digital space that we're in. It worries me very much for young persons. When I look at some examples of what's going on right now, for example, 1 in 8 teenagers at the moment know someone or have themselves been targeted by deep fake nudes. And often this happens in things like, for example, a Snapchat private group, which does not have the same legal policies as a public group. If you've been in the digital space recently and you've taken a moment to look at reels or short-form video content, the amount of AI slop is really disturbing. This is low-quality content, and some of it is so disturbing, I won't refer to it here for reasons of triggers, but it's quite disturbing. But a lot of others of it actually would probably be age-gated in, and we'd say, I mean, it's crap, but it's not terrible. It's going to meet the basic rules so our 12-year-olds can watch it. And this AI slop that makes so much money worries me a lot. And if we say under 16 this, under 13 this stuff still will get in because it doesn't include a quality argument and it doesn't include a well-being argument. We're missing something if we forget what's actually happening. We need to do more. So I want to go back to the science, and I want to urge you to think of the science. Recently, you can't see all the data here, but I'll walk you through the patterns. I've been talking to parents in the Netherlands, so I work in the Dutch context. I don't have data from the Polish context today, but to give you insight, I asked parents in about the end of June what they think we should be doing. Nearly all of them that I spoke with said, I want stricter rules from government. Nearly all said they think schools should do more. There's only about half that thought that young kids should be denied access. So this idea that everybody wants a ban from parents, there was a lot, but not all. Nearly all, however, said, I want better rules, and I want schools to do more. In addition, when I talked to these parents a little bit more, nearly all of them said social media companies should do more. Nearly all felt they as parents should do more. And nearly all thought that they needed to get more help on how to do this. So the answer of, if I ban it, it will go away, was not supported by parents. What parents were saying is, I need help everywhere. I need information, I need training, I have a role, schools have a role, and the companies have a role too. And I demand them to do better too. It's not just put an age and stop it. That might be part of it, but that's not fully it. And in all of this, we need to make sure that we ourselves, as the users, the adults, the caregivers, are competent in this space, and our young persons as well. So the story, the actual science, isn't as simple as ban it and we're done. So what do I think we should be doing? Well, I spend a lot of time studying something called digital competence. This is the confident and critical use of technology for work, leisure, and communication. It helps youth, but really all of us, figure out how to thrive in this digital society. And I've developed a measure, you can have it, it's publicly available, called the Dig IQ, and I can make sure it's accessible to you afterwards. You can have all the variants you'd like, where we try to measure actually what your Dig IQ looks like. And right now, I'm working on the second version of it. The second version is now mostly available as well, where what I do is I say, look, the skills we all need, including the young persons we work with, isn't just one thing. It's many different things. It's our strategic skills, knowing how to use the tech. It's our critical information skills. Do we know how to check if it's true or false, for example? It's our netiquette. Do we know how to interact with each other in a digital space? It's our creative skills. Can we make things? Can we create video? Can we create audio? What can we do? It's our ability to keep our devices and ourselves safe, right? So protecting passwords, et cetera. It's online health and well-being. With young persons, it involves, for example, can they stop? Do they know how to stop? Do they know when there's enough? It's sustainable skills, think green tech. It's digital problem solving. Do you know what to do when you're in a digital space and you're struggling? It's AI skills and Gen AI skills. and it's transactional skills. The way we interact in our daily lives and the technology we need to sort of, whether it's going to the doctor or paying our taxes, is increasingly digitized. Do we have these skills? All of these represent digital competence. And very, very, very recent data on this gave me a sense, in the Dutch context at least, about how kids are doing. Now, I talk to them and I work with kids and adults in a lot of different ways. So I'll ask them, for example, what they're able to do. And I measure it by talking about their skills. So self-report, do they think they can do it? I look at factual knowledge. What do they know? And then I do performance testing to see if what you say you can do and what you actually can do are the same. And the fact of the matter is, every one of us, kids included, overestimates. We all feel we're a little more confident than we actually are. And that's because you don't know what you don't know. In the tech space, sometimes you just don't know it yet. But when I ask kids even to tell me how confident they are, I'll give you some examples here, what we see is that they're stronger in some areas and weaker in others. So they do a pretty good job, for example, at knowing how to use technology. If you're working in this space, you know they can use it pretty well. And they're pretty good at problem solving. When something doesn't go well, they're better at most of us, actually. They're really great at figuring out how things work. They're naturally epistemically curious. They're really good at this. But they do need some help. All of us, young persons included, are struggling with AI and generative AI. We don't understand it fully. We don't know how to interact with it. We're struggling how to determine if it's real or not. We don't know its impact. Young kids are struggling with critical information skills, so is it real or not? Really, really struggling right now. With safety skills, how to protect themselves, and with well-being skills. They're saying, and they're making it really clear, I don't know how to stop. And this makes sense because the entire digital environment has been built without friction. It's been made to make sure they don't stop. And they say, hey, I can't. And they're struggling with transactional skills on how to interact in the world around them. They're still saying, can you help me with these tools? So they are signaling themselves that they need support. If I simply say, you no longer have access to certain technologies, I am not fixing this. Yes, it can help in certain ways, and I am fully behind making sure we take the content they shouldn't have out and put in some guardrails here. I'm fully behind that, 100%. I am a consultant for the YouTube Youth and Advisory Council, for example, where I talk about this often. But what I also know to be true is when they're 16 or 18, when the guardrails come off, I need them to have these skills too. And that cannot be lost in the dialogue of age verification fixes all. So where do I sit right now? Where am I sitting in all this story? I see a big push for the control approach. Banning with a blunt age gate, this will help us. What I know happens is when you do this, we see a lot of evidence of evasion. We already saw data coming out over the past 6 months from pilots in Australia. Kids put VPNs on their phones faster than adults know how to. They make new accounts. They figure out ways. Frankly, you can use YouTube without an account. So they'll just use it without an account. They will evade. There will be less oversight because when we say it's age-gated, suddenly we're going to lose the visibility of what's happening. That worries me. There's questions about privacy. I am still precisely trying to understand myself how much privacy we need to sacrifice in order for protection. I don't know the answer to that question yet. And what I also know is you're going to see uneven platform enforcement. The big platforms will be held to a higher standard than the smaller ones. Kids will go where they can, and we'll have more problems. As a result, my fear is if we go for the control approach, we will have gaps in safety, reduced voices, and reduced opportunities. Now, I want to point out, I do know that there's a lot happening here in Europe and globally on age verification, and I see some options for it. I really do. I'm not anti-age verification. I sit on the advisory board for the Digital Services Act. But I want to make sure we don't consider this the holy grail. Just this week, ChatGPT announced it was going to be developing age verification to identify users under 18. At the same time, there was a story coming out that said, how do you bypass age verification on Xhamster? Same time. At the same time, we see that data is coming out suggesting that there is racial bias in age estimates, and that these border moments, identifying if a person's 14 or 15, 11 or 12, systems aren't perfect at. And they often really get impacted by the racial bias that is trained in our models right now. We have a lot of stereotypes in our AI-based models. So age inferencing, where a system tries to guess the age, can have false, positive, and negative bias. It's imperfect. And age verification, when I say you need to prove to me with an ID, excludes those who don't have identification in many parts around the world. It can be part of the story, but if we make it the whole story, I worry we're going to get the story wrong. So what I'm trying to push for is what I consider a competence approach. One, age-appropriate, scientifically based design. We can do things when we make content, and we can push for tech companies to make sure that we have nudges that remind them time's up, limits, content defaults, smart age verification, thinking more thoughtfully about when and how and where. We can make sure that we're making sure that there's provenance indicators for if this is synthetic content. We all need to know if we're watching a deep fake or not. We all need to understand what's real and what's fake. We could think about targeted enforcement, identify the bad actors, and make sure we're really going after those. We can focus on making sure, which is what many of you are doing in this room, family and school-based digital competence training. So we're not just saying the solution is only by banning, but instead by being thoughtful and by training. We do independent audits to check to see what's going on. And if we do this, what I hope is that we reduce risk, and we end up with safer use, with the rights of young persons, the right to participate in the digital space, the right to know how to be in the digital space, the right to have the skills to thrive in the digital space. If we do that, I think we have a far better win. So my call out to all of you in the spaces of policy, in the spaces of practice where you're thinking about it, is to not focus only on protection or empowerment, but to find a way to do both. I know this is not easy. I know the headline isn't sexy. I know that there's many things that always look easier. Blunt bans look easier. But the devil's always in the details. And I hope we look at the details when it comes to the young person's lives that we're trying to support. Thank you for listening.